She called my safety reports scare tactics and shelved them. MSHA was already scheduled for a surprise inspection that Thursday. Monday, 2:23 p.m., Conference Room B at Ridgecrest Mining Corp headquarters, the small one without windows, the one they use when they don't want people seeing who's inside. I'd been in that room maybe 400 times over 25 years. Budget meetings, incident reviews. The time we lost a ventilation fan at mine number 2 during a July monsoon, and I coordinated the evacuation from that table with a paper map and a walkie-talkie. I knew the carpet stain by the door. I knew the overhead light on the left flickered when the AC kicked on. Tessa Reardon sat at the head of the table with her iPad propped up in front of her, the screen angled so I could see the slide deck. Ridgecrest, 2025, Narrative Forward Sustainability. The title glowed in teal and white. Behind her, an HR rep named Beth stood holding a manila folder, staring at a spot on the wall above my head, like it owed her money. I'd come straight from a ventilation inspection at mine number 3. My boots still had ore dust on them. My hard hat sat on the table, next to my elbow, upside down, the way you set it when you're staying a minute. Tessa told me my department was being dissolved. She said the word dissolved, like she'd practiced it. My quarterly safety reports were being shelved, fear-mongering that scares investors. My budget was being redirected to an ESG marketing campaign. My position was eliminated, effective, immediately. She read most of it from the iPad, glanced up every few seconds to check if I was reacting. I wasn't. Beth slid the severance paperwork across the table. I didn't look at it. I asked one question. Does your father know? Tessa's jaw tightened. She didn't answer. I picked up my hard hat, stood, looked at her for a moment, the manicured nails that had never touched a rock face, the designer suede boots that would dissolve in a mine adit, the iPad still angled outward like a prop in a play nobody bought tickets to. You'll want to read those reports before Thursday. She didn't ask why. The parking lot was bright and empty. 84 degrees, October in Globe, Arizona, the kind of dry heat that makes the asphalt shimmer by afternoon. The sun didn't care. The desert never does. I put my hard hat on the passenger seat of my truck and sat there for a while with the engine off, looking at the headframe of mine number 1 visible over the roofline. I'd been looking at that headframe for 25 years from this parking lot. Different angle depending on where I parked. My name is Conrad Foss. I'm 54 years old. I've been in mining for 35 years. Started at 19 as a mucker's helper at a small underground silver operation in central Arizona. If you don't know what a mucker does, it's the hardest, dirtiest job underground. You're shoveling broken rock into ore cars after the blast crew finishes, breathing dust so thick your snot turns black by noon, and nobody cares what your name is because you're the lowest man in the hole. That was me. 19 years old, 160 pounds. Steel-toed boots I bought at a surplus store in Mesa. I worked every job underground after that. Timberman, driller, blaster's assistant, shift lead. Learn the rock the way you learn a language. Not from a book, from being inside it every day until the patterns made sense in your hands before your head caught up. I earned my mine safety certifications through night school. 8 years of classes after 10-hour shifts. Gila Community College first, then the MSHA Academy in Beckley, West Virginia. I studied roof bolt patterns and ventilation flow rates under the kitchen light while Diane slept. The math wasn't hard. The staying awake was. I hold the only active MSHA approved qualified person designation at Ridgecrest Mining Corp. That designation is required by federal law, 30 CFR Part 57, for every ventilation plan and every ground control plan across all 4 of the company's underground operations. Every plan signed. Every plan mine. My name, my credential, my signature on every document that keeps those mines legal and those men alive. I joined Ridgecrest in 1999 at 29. The company had one operating mine and a market cap under $200 million. When they dissolved my department on Monday, they were a $1.7 billion copper and molybdenum producer with 4 active underground operations. I built every safety protocol, every ventilation design, every ground control procedure that made that growth possible. The company grew from 1 mine to 4. I grew with it. I was the safety infrastructure. That's not a figure of speech. I mean it literally. Every ventilation fan placement, every ground support specification, every escape route, every emergency procedure. 25 years of institutional knowledge that existed in my head and in my handwritten notebooks, not in any system a 26-year-old with a slide deck could access. I drove home slow. The road from headquarters winds through the Globe Miami mining district. Copper-stained earth on both sides. Tailings ponds catching the afternoon light. Headframes standing against the sky like monuments to work that doesn't explain itself. I'd driven that road maybe 6,000 times. The CB radio mounted on my dash crackled with static from the mine frequencies. I didn't turn it off. I thought about the ventilation redesign at mine number 2. That was 2011. The company didn't want to spend the $3 million. I sat in Patrick Reardon's office and showed him the methane accumulation data. Showed him exactly where the gas would pool if we didn't reroute the intake airway. Showed him the 12 men who worked that section on second shift. He signed the work order that afternoon. Those 12 men went home every night for the next 13 years because of that redesign. None of them know my name is on it. That's fine. That's the job. I thought about the ground control protocol at mine number 4, the one I developed after the 2016 rock burst. Other mining companies adopted it. It became an industry standard. Luke called me from Nevada last month. He's 22, works as a mine electrician apprentice at a copper operation in Elko. The guys at my mine use your ground control spec, Dad. They don't even know it's yours. I didn't tell him how that made me feel. He knew. I thought about his high school graduation, the one I missed because of the roof fall investigation at mine number 1. Diane sent me a photo from the bleachers, Luke in his cap and gown, grinning, the sun in his eyes. I taped that photo to the corner of my hard hat and left it there for a year until the laminate wore through. I've got the photo in a drawer now. The tape marks are still on the hard hat. Diane, my wife, 52 years old, school bus driver for the Gila County School District. Same route for 14 years. Knows every kid's name, every parent, every pothole on every dirt road between Globe and the San Carlos Junction. She kept the house running through every emergency call, every midnight drive to the mine. Every Sunday I spent reviewing ventilation data instead of sitting on the porch with her. She told me once, years ago, quiet, not angry, "You're worth more than they'll ever pay you, Conrad." I didn't argue. I just went back to work. This year I submitted 4 quarterly safety reports, each one specific, each one detailed, each one signed by the only qualified person in the company. The Q2 report flagged ventilation failures at mine number 1. Airflow readings below minimum in 2 sections of the North Drift with a 45-day remediation timeline. The Q3 report flagged missing ground support at mine number 3. Roof bolt spacing exceeded the design specification in the main haulage with a 60-day remediation timeline and a cost estimate down to the bolt. Every report time-stamped. Every report filed. Every report now shelved by a 26-year-old who'd been at the company for 11 weeks and had never been underground long enough for the dust to settle on her boots. She lasted 20 minutes on her first mine visit. Wore suede boots. Complained about the dust. Asked if the ventilation fans could be turned down because they were loud. The ventilation fans. The ones I designed the placement for. The ones keeping the air breathable 1,000 feet below the surface. She asked if they could be turned down. Tessa Reardon arrived at Ridgecrest 11 weeks before everything fell apart. Stanford MBA. 7 months of sustainability consulting performed from a co-working space in Austin, Texas. Her father, Patrick Reardon, the CEO, the man who founded this company 30 years ago, created a title for her, Vice President of Corporate Strategy and Sustainability. Her first week, she asked why the environmental department had such a large budget. She meant my department, safety and compliance. She couldn't tell the difference. To her, a ventilation plan and a recycling initiative were the same line item. She had a Tesla shipped from Austin. White. Had an EV charger installed in the headquarters parking lot her second week. Cost the company $12,000. The charger was the only new thing in a parking lot full of trucks with 200,000 miles on them. I pulled into my driveway. The Silverado, 2011, white, 218,000 miles, dented tailgate from backing into a mine portal gate 7 years ago, rolled to a stop on gravel I'd heard 10,000 times. Diane was on the front porch, 2 metal chairs on a concrete slab, the Penal Mountains behind her going amber in the late afternoon light. She saw my face before I got to the steps. What happened? I set my hard hat on the bench by the door. The same bench, the same hard hat. The dented brass cap lamp from my mucker days still clipped to the brim. Filament burned out years ago, but it goes where I go. First thing I picked up when I cleared my desk. Last thing I put in the box. They dissolved my department. A pause. The refrigerator hummed through the screen door. Luke's old room was quiet down the hall. Wrestling trophies still on the shelf. Bed still made. All of it? All of it. Diane looked at me for a long moment. She's driven the same bus route for 14 years. She knows what steady looks like, and she knows when it breaks. What are you going to do? I sat down next to her. The metal chair was warm from the sun. The Penal Mountains were losing their color, going dark against the sky. On a clear night, you could see the glow of Mine No. 2's surface lights from this porch. I'd watched those lights for 25 years. Wait! Tuesday morning, Tessa sent a company-wide email. Exciting changes ahead. Ridgecrest is pivoting to a narrative-forward sustainability model. Our ESG integration will position us as industry leaders in stakeholder engagement. More details coming soon. This is day 1. She signed it with her full title, Vice President of Corporate Strategy and Sustainability, the title her father made up for her in July. By 10 a.m., she'd posted a LinkedIn article. Day 1 of Real Change, Why Mining Companies Need to Stop Fear-Based Compliance. The header image was a stock photo of a sun setting over a desert landscape. Not Ridgecrest's desert, not Arizona's desert, just a desert she'd pulled from a photo library. The article argued that mining companies relied on outdated compliance theater to justify bloated safety budgets, and that the future belonged to companies brave enough to tell a narrative-forward sustainability story to investors. 400 likes by noon, comments from ESG consultants, marketing professionals, and people whose LinkedIn profiles listed thought leader as a job title. Not a single one had ever been inside a mine. She redecorated my office. Dale Mercer told me later. Called me Tuesday evening, voice tight. She had my inspection maps pulled down. The topographic overlays of all 4 mine ventilation systems, hand annotated over 25 years, gone. Replaced with framed sustainability infographics, teal and white, matching the slide deck. The brass cap lamp I'd left on the credenza was sitting in a cardboard box in the hallway. She probably walked past it a dozen times without knowing what it was. She ordered new business cards. Tessa Reardon, VP of Corporate Strategy and Sustainability. Embossed. That was Tuesday. Dale called me again that night. He'd forwarded a screenshot to my phone while we were talking. An internal email thread. Tessa to Patrick Reardon and 2 board members, sent Monday evening, 6 hours after my termination. I read it sitting on the back porch. The Penal Mountains were black against a sky full of stars. Diane was inside. The house was quiet. The email read, "The transition was clean and professional. Conrad Foss was a relic of a fear-based compliance culture. His reports read like a man trying to justify his own job. We don't need a ditch digger with a lanyard running a billion-dollar company's reputation. Budget reallocation to ESG is already underway. This is exactly the kind of leadership move that positions us for the investor narrative we've been building. Patrick Reardon's reply was one line, a single thumbs-up emoji. A thumbs-up emoji. 25 years, 4 mines, every ventilation plan, every ground control procedure, every emergency protocol, every man who went home safe because I did my job right. All of it reduced to a thumbs-up emoji from the man I sat across from in 2011 when I showed him the methane data that would have killed 12 of his employees. I set the phone down on the arm of the chair. The screen went dark. Ditch digger with a lanyard. Something settled in my chest. Not anger. Anger is hot. This was cold and still, like the air at the bottom of a shaft before the ventilation reaches it. Perfectly calm. Perfectly clear. If you've ever written a report that someone threw in the trash, hit that like button and subscribe. Wednesday afternoon. Janet Collins, Ridgecrest's in-house general counsel, 3 years on the job, smart, careful, was reviewing compliance documentation for a routine insurance renewal, the kind of paperwork nobody thinks about until it matters. She pulled up the ventilation plans for all 4 mines. Every single one bore one signature, Conrad W. Foss, MSHA, qualified person. She opened the ground control plans, same signature. The emergency evacuation procedures, same signature. The annual compliance certifications filed with the federal government, same name, same credential, same man. She checked the company's MSHA designation records. One name, one. Janet picked up the phone and called the MSHA district office in Phoenix. She asked a simple question. How long does it take to designate a new qualified person? The answer came back flat and bureaucratic, the way federal answers always do. 4 to 6 months. Minimum. Assuming the candidate already held the prerequisite certifications, which, in Ridgecrest's case, nobody did. Conrad was the only employee who'd completed the MSHA Academy program. The only one with the field experience hours. The only one who'd passed the federal examination. The company hadn't developed a backup because they'd never needed one. They'd had Conrad. Janet's hands went still on her desk. She sat there for a moment, doing the math she wished she'd done on Monday. Then she stood, walked down the hall, and opened Patrick Reardon's office door without knocking. We have a problem. Patrick was reviewing Tessa's ESG budget proposal, a 40-page document with charts in teal and white. He glanced up. Can it wait? No. His qualified person designation is the only one on file for all 4 operations. We've been operating 4 underground mines without a federally compliant safety signatory since Monday. She paused. And MSHA is coming tomorrow. Patrick's pen stopped moving. What do you mean coming tomorrow? Unannounced inspection. They don't tell us when. That's the point. But they're required to inspect underground operations at least 4 times a year, and the last inspection was in June. We're overdue. It could be tomorrow. It could be Friday. But the inspection schedule doesn't wait for us to fix this. And right now, there is no legal fix. Not in time. Patrick stared at her. The ESG budget proposal sat open on his desk, teal and white, full of words like narrative forward and stakeholder optics. He didn't call Conrad. He didn't call anyone. He told Janet he'd handle it and closed the door. He didn't handle it. Wednesday night. I sat on the back porch with cold coffee in the thermos, Folgers from the morning, the lid that doesn't seal right, letting the heat bleed out all day. The lights of globes spread below. The Pinal Mountains were just shapes in the dark, but I knew every ridge, every drainage, every place the rock changed from granite to schist. You learn the mountain from the inside out. You learn what holds and what doesn't. You learn where the cracks run before the rock tells you. My phone rang. Glenn Ashworth. Glenn is 67, retired MSHA district manager, Southwestern District, the man who inspected Ridgecrest's operations when I was still a shift safety lead. He watched me come up. 22 years of knowing each other, first on opposite sides of a clipboard, then as colleagues, then as friends. He lives in Prescott now, still has every MSHA contact in his phone, still answers on the first ring. Heard what happened. You okay? I told him. All of it. The dissolved department, the shelved reports, the ESG budget, the suede boots. Glenn was quiet for a moment. I could hear him breathing. The kind of quiet a man holds when he's thinking carefully and doesn't want to waste a word. You're the only QP on record for all 4 operations. Without you, those ventilation plans are unsigned. Every ground control plan, every compliance certification, all of it requires your designation. MSHA won't need to find violations, Conrad. The plans themselves are invalid the moment you walked out. You know that, right? I looked out at the dark where mine number 2's surface lights usually glowed. They were on. The night shift was working. Men underground, right now, in tunnels I'd designed the ventilation for. Under roofs I'd specified the bolt patterns for. Breathing air that moved through pathways I'd calculated over 25 years of studying how air behaves in rock. I know. Magellan's been trying to get you for 10 years. You know that too. I know that too. I'll make a call. Thursday, 6:47 a.m. 3 MSHA inspection teams, 12 inspectors total, arrived unannounced at mines number 1, number 2, and number 4 simultaneously. A 4th team arrived at mine number 3 at 7:15 a.m. Standard unannounced inspection, already on the schedule before my termination. They were coming regardless. The timing wasn't revenge. It was arithmetic. Federal law requires 4 inspections per year for underground metal and non-metal operations. The last one was June. October was overdue. But now there was no qualified person to walk the mines with the inspectors. No one who could explain the ventilation readings. No one who could produce the ground control certifications. No one who could answer the first question any MSHA inspector asks when they step onto a mine property. Where's your QP? The new acting safety liaison Tessa had appointed, a marketing coordinator named Brad from the ESG team, met the inspectors at mine number 1 in a polo shirt and khakis. He did not have a hard hat. He could not answer a single question about ventilation flow rates. The lead inspector asked him to produce the current ventilation plan for the North Drift. Brad pulled out his phone and started scrolling through emails. The inspector waited 11 seconds. Then he asked to see the mine manager. Over 8 hours, MSHA inspectors documented 23 significant and substantial violations across all 4 operations. Ventilation failures at mine number 1, airflow readings below minimum in 2 sections of the North Drift, the exact failures I'd flagged in my Q2 report, with a 45-day remediation timeline that expired in August. Nobody had touched it. Missing ground support at mine number 3. Roof bolt spacing exceeded the design specification in the main haulage, exactly as I'd documented in my Q3 report, with a 60-day remediation timeline and a cost estimate down to the bolt. The report was still in the company's files. Time-stamped. Signed. The inspectors pulled it themselves. It was right there. Filed, flagged, and ignored. Inadequate escape route maintenance at mine number 4. Emergency communication failures at mine number 2. Ventilation doors propped open with cinder blocks at 2 locations. A violation so basic it would have made a first-year safety trainee sick. MSHA issued an imminent danger order under Section 107A of the Mine Act. 3 of 4 mines shut down immediately. All miners withdrawn. The 4th mine, mine number 3, operated under severe restrictions that cut production to a fraction. Ridgecrest lost $4.1 million in production that day alone. $4.1 million. One day. Thursday, 4:55 p.m. Dale Mercer called me from the mine number 2 parking lot. I could hear the wind and the sound of trucks idling. Miners coming off the last shift before the shutdown, loading gear into truck beds, the low murmur of men who know something bad has happened and are waiting to find out how bad. Dale's voice was tight, controlled, because Dale Mercer is a shift foreman who's managed rock bursts and equipment fires, but tight underneath. They shut us down, Conrad. 3 mines. The inspectors found everything you flagged. Everything. I was in my garage, sanding a piece of mesquite wood for a shelf Diane had asked for 3 months ago. The sawdust smelled like the desert. Warm, dry, faintly sweet. I stopped sanding. The ventilation at number 1? Sighted. S and S. The ground support at number 3? Sighted. Imminent danger. I set down the sandpaper. The mesquite was smooth under my hand. I'd cut it from a dead tree on our property last spring. I wrote those reports. I know you did. Everyone knows you did. Friday morning. Janet Collins delivered the full damage assessment to Patrick Reardon and the board in an emergency session. The boardroom had never been that quiet. $4.1 million per day in lost production. Every day, the mines stayed shut. No qualified person on staff. Minimum 4 to 6 months to get one designated, assuming they could find a candidate with the prerequisite certifications, which they could not, because they'd never developed one. Criminal negligence referral from the Department of Labor to the U.S. Attorney's Office, because Conrad's reports documented the hazards. The company was formally notified, and the reports were shelved by a named executive whose authorization was in writing. Janet said her name without inflection. That named executive is Tessa Reardon, whose authorization to eliminate the safety department is documented in her own email correspondence, filed in the company's records, and now in MSHA's enforcement file. She paused. Her name is in the federal enforcement record. It's a public filing. It doesn't come off. Patrick Reardon sat at the head of the table. The ESG budget proposal was gone. The teal and white slide deck was gone. The room smelled like burnt coffee and fear. He didn't speak for a long time. Tessa's LinkedIn post from Tuesday was still live. Day 1 of real change. The stock was down 31% and falling. Saturday morning, I drove to Prescott. Glenn Ashworth's kitchen. Small, clean, the coffee pot already on when I walked in. Glenn poured 2 mugs without asking. Black, no sugar. He sat across from me at a table that had seen 40 years of conversations like this one. Men in an industry where the stakes are measured in lives, not quarterly earnings. He slid a business card across the table. Warren Stafford, CEO, Magellan Resources. He wants to talk. Today. The offer's already drafted. I picked up the card. White stock. Simple font. A copper-colored logo. I turned it over. Blank on the back. I put it in my shirt pocket. Glenn watched me. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. The coffee was hot. The kitchen was quiet. Through the window, I could see the Bradshaw Mountains in the distance, and somewhere beyond them, 4 mines sitting dark and silent with $4.1 million bleeding out of them every 24 hours, and a 26-year-old's LinkedIn post still collecting likes from people who'd never set foot underground. Sunday afternoon, I drove to Tucson. The road south from Globe drops through the San Pedro Valley, copper-stained earth giving way to mesquite flats. The Santa Catalina Mountains, building on the horizon like a wall. 2.5 hours with the windows cracked and the CB radio off for the first time in years. I didn't turn on the regular radio either. Just the road and the engine and the sound of air moving through a truck that's been paid off longer than Tessa Reardon has been out of college. Magellan Resources Regional Office sat near the base of the Santa Rita Mountains. A modest building. Single story. The kind of place where the parking lot is gravel and the trucks outnumber the sedans. No EV charger. No teal and white infographics in the lobby. It smelled like rock samples and printer toner and the faint mineral tang of core boxes stacked in a back room. A working office for a working company. Warren Stafford was 58, mine engineer by training. When he shook my hand, I felt the calluses. Hands like a man who'd held a drill before he held a balance sheet. His office had core samples on the windowsill, a hard hat on the bookshelf, and a topographic map of Magellan's primary operation pinned to the wall behind his desk. No slide deck, no props. He poured coffee from a pot on the credenza, handed me a mug, sat down across from me with the door closed. He laid it out plain. Chief Safety Officer, $1.1 million annually. $44 million equity and retention package vested over 5 years. Full authority over safety operations across all Magellan sites. Every mine, every ventilation plan, every ground control procedure. My own team, my own budget, my own mandate. Nobody between me and the CEO on safety decisions. Stafford leaned back in his chair. I'm not buying your resume, Conrad. I'm buying 35 years of keeping men alive underground. Name your terms. I didn't negotiate. I'd spent 25 years at a company that paid me a fraction of what the market said I was worth, because I believed loyalty meant something. It did. Just not to them. I asked one question. Will you read my reports? Stafford looked at me. Not past me, not through me, not at an iPad over my shoulder. At me. Every word, every quarter. I signed. The bleeding started before the ink dried on my Magellan contract. Ridgecrest's 3 shuttered mines stayed dark. $4.1 million per day, every day, compounding into a number that made the board meetings shorter and quieter each week. The company hired 2 outside safety consultants. Expensive, credentialed on paper, neither one holding a qualified person designation. They couldn't sign the plans MSHA required because they didn't have the federal authority to sign them. They couldn't redesign the ventilation systems because they'd never seen Ridgecrest's geology. They spent their first week requesting documentation that didn't exist in any system. Documentation that existed in my notebooks and in my head, carried out the door in a cardboard box on a Monday afternoon while Tessa was posting to LinkedIn. Then MSHA called me, not Ridgecrest, me, at Magellan. The district office in Phoenix, the same office Glenn Ashworth had run for 15 years, contacted me as the foremost expert on Ridgecrest's specific geology, ventilation infrastructure, and ground control requirements. They asked me to advise on remediation standards for reopening the 3 shuttered mines. What would it take to bring those operations back into compliance? What were the specific engineering requirements? The timeline? The cost? I agreed. I had no obligation to, but those were my mines, my ventilation designs, my ground support specs. And there were men, Dale Mercer's crews, shift workers I'd known by name for 2 decades, who needed those mines to reopen safely, or not at all. I wrote the remediation recommendations the way I write everything. Carefully. Once. With complete accuracy. Every ventilation reroute specified to the cubic foot per minute. Every ground support deficiency mapped to the exact station and elevation. Every escape route. Every communication system. Every piece of equipment that needed replacement or recertification. 25 years of knowledge distilled into a technical document so thorough that the MSHA Review Board approved it without revision. The estimated cost to implement, $230 million. I wrote the original plans. I flagged every deficiency. I knew exactly what it took to make those mines safe again. It cost them $230 million. And there wasn't a soul in that company who could argue with a single line, because every recommendation was based on data I'd collected, systems I'd designed, and geology I'd mapped with my own hands over a quarter century. Two of Ridgecrest's senior mine engineers resigned within 10 days and accepted positions at Magellan. Then Dale Mercer, 18 years at mine number 2, the steadiest shift foreman I'd ever worked with, watched 3 weeks of chaos, put in his notice, and followed. He called me the night before his last day. Didn't say much. Just, I'm not working for people who throw your reports in the trash and call it leadership. The institutional knowledge walked out the door one man at a time, and every man walked in the same direction. Toward me. Ridgecrest's stock dropped 52% over 6 weeks. The market didn't need a press release to do the math. 3 mines dark, $4.1 million bleeding out per day, no qualified person, no timeline for reopening, and a $230 million remediation bill sitting on the CEO's desk like a headstone. 3 institutional investors, pension funds with significant holdings, filed a $185 million lawsuit against the board for fiduciary breach. The complaint cited the elimination of a federally required safety function as the direct and proximate cause of the mine shutdowns. The word reckless appeared 14 times. The Department of Labor formally referred the case to the U.S. Attorney's Office for criminal negligence review. The referral cited the shelved quarterly reports, documents proving the company had been notified of specific hazards by its own qualified person, and that the executive who eliminated the safety department did so over documented warnings with active remediation timelines. The reports were time-stamped, signed, filed in the company's own system. The evidence wasn't circumstantial. It was a paper trail so clean it could have been an exhibit in a textbook. Week 6, Patrick Reardon fired Tessa. No LinkedIn post, no company-wide email, no slide deck, just a closed door and a conversation in the same building where she'd sat across from me 11 weeks earlier and called my life's work fear-mongering that scares investors. I don't know what Patrick said to her. I don't need to. What I know is this. Tessa Reardon's name sits in the MSHA enforcement record as the executive who authorized the elimination of safety oversight at a company operating 4 underground mines. It's a federal filing, public, permanent. It doesn't come off. Every employer who ever runs a background check in the mining industry, or any regulated industry, will find it. Her Stanford MBA will sit on the same resume as a federal enforcement citation that resulted in 23 violations, 3 mine shutdowns, a criminal negligence referral, and $230 million in remediation costs. 11 weeks. That's how long her tenure lasted. Ridgecrest announced emergency layoffs. 340 workers across all 4 sites. Miners, mechanics, mill operators, the people who actually made the company worth $1.7 billion. The market cap dropped below $800 million. 2 board members resigned. The remaining board hired an outside CEO to manage the crisis, a restructuring specialist, not a mining man. Reopening the mines under my MSHA advised remediation standards would take 14 months and $230 million the company didn't have without dilutive financing that would gut the existing shareholders. Patrick Reardon gave a statement to the mining trade press. He didn't mention me by name. He didn't need to. Everyone in the industry knew. My office at Magellan is smaller than Tessa's was at Ridgecrest. It overlooks a mine tailings pond and a headframe. Not a city skyline. Not a desert stock photo. There's a hard hat on the credenza. A stack of ventilation plans on the desk waiting for my signature. My qualified person designation. The same credential. The same federal authority. Earned 1 night school credit at a time under a kitchen light in Globe, Arizona. Now protects Magellan's operations. My salary is 7 times what Ridgecrest paid me. My equity stake will be worth $44 million if I stay 5 years. I plan to stay longer. I called Luke on a Sunday evening. Our standing call, the one that hasn't changed since he moved to Elko. How's the mine? Good. New ventilation spec came down. It's one of yours, Dad. Magellan's version. I smiled. First time in a while that it reached my eyes. How do you know it's mine? Because it works. Saturday morning, 2 months after the firing. December now. The first real cold of the season. 47 degrees at dawn. The kind of desert morning where your breath is visible, and the coffee steam rises straight up because there's no wind. Conrad and Diane on the back porch. 2 metal chairs on a concrete slab. The Pinal Mountains sharp against a pale sky. The peaks pink with first light. Coffee in my dented thermos. The same one I've had for 15 years. The lid that doesn't quite seal. Folgers from the drip machine. Diane was reading the paper. The actual paper, delivered to the mailbox. The way she's done it every Saturday since we moved into this house. I wasn't doing anything. For the first time in 25 years, I wasn't thinking about ventilation readings. Wasn't thinking about ground support. Wasn't calculating airflow rates or reviewing bolt patterns or running through the checklist I carried in my head for 4 mines and 600 men. I was sitting on my porch in the cold morning air, watching the mountains turn from gray to pink, holding a thermos of coffee that had already gone cold. I drank it anyway. I always do. Diane looked over, lowered the paper half an inch. You're different. How? You're here. The mountains were pink. The air was still. Somewhere out there, 4 mines sat in various states of silence and crisis, and 340 people were looking for work, and a federal enforcement file was getting thicker by the week. And somewhere in Austin, or wherever she'd gone, a 26-year-old with a Stanford MBA was learning that a public filing doesn't come off, and a slide deck doesn't keep a roof from falling. I took another sip. Cold coffee, same thermos, same porch, same woman next to me. You want to know what 35 years underground teaches you? The mountain doesn't care about your MBA. It only respects the man who knows where the cracks are. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe and ring that notification bell to get alerts about new stories like this one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.